corticospinal. This is a very important descending pathway, right? Descending. This is a motor pathway, and as the name suggests, it's descending from the cortex to the spinal cord. If it's motor in function, then we know exactly which part of the spinal cord it's going. It's going to go to the ventral motor neurons in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. Everybody get that? Good. Now, as we have been looking at, this corticospinal is coming from the, it's a motor pathway, it's going to be descending from the motor parts of the brain. Now, I told you that a third of this corticospinal is descending from the primary motor cortex. A third. Another third is coming from a couple areas. One of them is the supplementary motor area. And this supplementary motor area, guys, it's the extension of the premotor cortex on the medial side. It's the extension of the premotor cortex on the medial side. So it's coming from, a third is coming from there, as well as the premotor cortex, and even the prefrontal cortex. So 1/3 is coming from about 4 different places. Supplementary motor area, premotor area, prefrontal cortex, and maybe some other garbage place. Right? And then now the final third, surprisingly, the final third is coming from the sensory cortex, the postcentral gyrus. Okay? You agree? Good. In other words, the corticospinal pathway does not come only from the motor areas. Right. Now, how does this pathway now descend to the spinal cord? Remember now, this is a motor pathway, which means therefore that the cell bodies are going to be residing in these areas we have talked about, the cell bodies. And by the way, there's a reason why the precentral gyrus tends to be a little thicker than the postcentral gyrus. The precentral tends to be a little thicker than the post, and it's because there are some giant cells that reside in the precentral gyrus. So in addition to the normal pyramidal cells, there are some cells, I don't know if Dr. Thomas mentioned them, yeah? But there are some cells in the cerebral cortex, the whole cerebral, it don't matter if it's the occipital lobe or the parietal lobe or temporal lobe or what. The entire cerebral cortex, the gray matter that is made up of several populations of cells. One of them is some cells we call pyramidal cells. They're shaped like a kite. Pyramidal cells, right? So the cortex has some cells that look like that. Some cells that look like that. And the axons come down and so on and dendrites. Right? We call them pyramidal cells. These are also multipolar neurons. I'm saying that the precentral gyrus have some big ones. The big ones are called giant cells of Betz, B-E-T-Z. Yeah? So a small percentage of the pyramidal cells that we find in the precentral gyrus are the giant cells, maybe 3% or whatever, I don't even know right now. But these big giant cells are what confer a sort of more robust character to the precentral gyrus. Alright? So sometimes they ask you, why is the precentral a little bigger than the post? It's due to the giant cells of Betz. But anyway, I'm saying that the motor areas that are giving rise to this corticospinal and even the other areas, supplementary and so on, they have the cell bodies for these neurons, cell bodies. Then the axons now are going to leave these cortical areas. They're going to traverse the corona radiata, which is the spreading out of the internal capsule into the cortex. They're going to traverse the corona radiata first. And guess what? It is important for me to mention that, because sometimes a patient comes and the lesion is actually in the corona radiata. It's in the corona radiata of the internal capsule in the cortex. So now the axons are going to, so we're talking about corticospinal now. The axons are leaving the cortex, they're traversing the corona radiata, and then from there now they're going to